I was a patrol officer who stumbled onto a government secret, and within hours, the agency I trusted turned my entire life into a fabricated crime scene. They were ready to bury me for an organized scheme I hadn't committed, but they made one fatal mistake. They left me alive to tell the truth. The night air in the D.C. suburbs was thick, heavy with the humidity of a dying summer and the scent of ozone from a brewing storm. I was 3 years into my tenure as a patrol officer, a career I had chosen with the naive belief that I could genuinely make a difference. But that night, the system I swore to protect revealed its jagged, rusted edges. I was parked in an unmarked cruiser off a service road near a private estate, running surveillance on a lead that had come across my desk anonymously. The tip claimed there was a clandestine meeting happening at the property, something involving high-level corruption that had been scrubbed from every official ledger. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't authorized. But the sheer weight of the documents I'd received, names of politicians, shell companies, and enough evidence to collapse a city government, had pushed me past the point of following protocol. A black sedan pulled up to the gated entrance. I dimmed my lights, holding my breath. A man stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. Even from 50 yards away, I recognized him. It was Director Miller, the man who had been the face of federal integrity for a decade, the man who stood on TV screens across the country preaching transparency. He didn't walk to the gate. He waited. A moment later, a second vehicle rolled up. An armored truck, silent and foreboding. 2 men in tactical gear emerged. They didn't look like law enforcement. They looked like shadows. They began unloading heavy, unmarked crates. My heart hammered against my ribs as I grabbed my binoculars. As the light hit one of the crates that had been dropped, the wood splintered. It wasn't money. It wasn't documents. It was stacks of what looked like vacuum-sealed packages with forbidden, dangerous labels. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a standard investigation. This was a massive, organized scheme, operating under the umbrella of the very agency tasked with hunting it down. I didn't think. I acted on instinct, a fatal mistake that would change the trajectory of my entire existence. I pulled my service weapon, exited my vehicle, and moved through the dense brush, closing the distance. The gravel crunched beneath my boots, a sound that seemed deafening in the stillness. I aimed my illegal weapon, a civilian piece I'd kept in my car for range days, directly at the center of the exchange. "Federal agents, drop the packages and get on the ground," I shouted, my voice cracking with adrenaline. The 2 men in tactical gear froze, but Director Miller didn't flinch. He turned slowly, his face composed in a mask of chilling indifference. He didn't look afraid. He looked annoyed, as if I were a minor traffic violation inconveniencing his evening commute. "You have no idea what you're doing, son," Miller said, his voice smooth and cold as polished stone. "I know exactly what I'm looking at," I retorted, keeping the weapon steady, though my hands were trembling. "I have the evidence. I have the files. You're going to the Internal Oversight Committee for this." Miller let out a short, dry laugh. He reached slowly into his inner jacket pocket, not for a weapon, but for a phone. "Do you think you're the first hero to come along, officer? Do you think the truth is a commodity that matters here?" Before I could fire a warning shot, the silence of the night was shattered, not by gunfire but by the blinding glare of 3 high-intensity spotlights erupting from the trees behind me. I was surrounded. My radio crackled to life, filled with static and a voice I didn't recognize, a cold, mechanical tone that sent a shiver down my spine. "Drop the illegal weapon, officer. You are currently in violation of federal security protocols. You are under arrest for attempted assault on a federal official." I spun around, but it was too late. Red laser dots danced across my chest. My own department, my own brothers and sisters, were standing there, backed by agents from the Service of Internal Security. They weren't there to save the day. They were there to clean up the mess. And as the director stepped toward me, a predator closing in on wounded prey, I realized the horrifying truth. The trap hadn't been set for him. It had been set for me. The phone in his hand lit up, and he looked at the screen, smiling at something he saw. "You're not a hero, officer. You're just a liability." My finger tightened on the trigger, but as the first agent lunged, a sudden sharp sting of a stun device hit my neck, and the world began to tilt toward black. The floor was freezing, and the smell of damp concrete and metallic decay filled my lungs as I struggled to regain consciousness. I was in a room devoid of windows, illuminated only by a flickering overhead light that buzzed like an angry insect. My hands were cuffed behind my back, the steel biting into my wrists with every involuntary twitch. Every memory from the previous night crashed back into my mind. The director's icy smile, the betrayal by my own department, and the realization that I had walked straight into a kill box. I hadn't been processed by the local precinct. There were no booking photos, no phone call, and no Miranda rights read by anyone with a badge I recognized. I was in a black site, a place that technically didn't exist on any map. The door to my cell creaked open, revealing not a guard, but a man in a charcoal suit. It was one of the tactical operatives from the estate, though now he was dressed in business attire, looking as unremarkable as a bank teller. He tossed a thick file onto the table in front of me and pulled out a chair, the screech of metal on concrete grating against my nerves. He didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at me, his eyes devoid of any human empathy. "You have a very interesting digital footprint," he finally said, his voice disturbingly calm. "You spent months digging into government contracts. You found a thread and you decided to pull it. The problem, officer, is that you didn't just find a thread. You found the entire tapestry. You're running a massive organized scheme," I spat, ignoring the burning in my jaw where I'd likely been struck during my capture. "I saw the prohibited packages. I saw the director." The man leaned forward, and the light caught the edge of his sharp features. "You saw what you were meant to see. Or rather, you saw a version of the truth that will ensure your life ends within these walls. You aren't here for an interrogation. You're here for a transition." He slid the file toward me. I looked down, and my breath caught. It was a fabricated dossier. It claimed that I had been under investigation for months for ties to dangerous radicals. It had photographs, doctored images of me meeting with known associates of underground cells, receiving packages of prohibited substances, and discussing plans to destabilize the very sector I swore to serve. They had built a mountain of evidence against me, a perfect legal architecture designed to justify a lifelong disappearance. "This is a lie," I hissed, my voice trembling with rage. "You know it's a lie." "Truth is a variable, not a constant," he replied smoothly. "In your pocket we found an illegal weapon. In your cruiser we found communications that suggest you were planning a high-profile violent act. We're going to frame you for a massive attempt to dismantle federal infrastructure. By the time the public hears your name, it won't be as a whistleblower. It will be as a radical who tried to burn the system down from the inside." He stood up, signaling to the shadows outside the door. Two men entered, their faces obscured by tactical masks. They didn't have shackles. They had a syringe. My heart began to drum a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "They're pinning a charge of attempting to compromise national security on you," the man said, turning toward the door. "The Internal Oversight Committee is already preparing the press release. You're facing an enormous amount of time, dozens of years, for a crime you didn't commit, using evidence we manufactured while you were unconscious. Don't worry about an attorney. You won't be seeing one." As the masked men closed in, I realized with sickening clarity that the Service of Internal Security wasn't here to audit the director. They were his cleanup crew. They were the ones ensuring that any threat to the organized scheme was erased. I kicked out at the table, sending it skidding across the floor, and backed into the corner, screaming for anyone to hear me. "You can't do this," I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. "I have contacts. I sent an encrypted backup of the files to a secure server." The man paused at the threshold, his hand on the door handle. He looked back at me, not with concern but with a pitying smirk that made my blood run cold. "You mean the backup you sent at 11:42 p.m., the one that was intercepted by our cybersecurity unit within 3 seconds of hitting the cloud? That backup didn't reach the news, officer. It reached our trash bin." He gestured to the masked men, who advanced with the precision of machines. One reached for my arm, his grip like a vice. Just as the needle tipped with a pale, viscous liquid neared my skin, a muffled explosion rocked the entire building. The floor beneath us bucked, and the overhead light shattered into a shower of sparks. The cell door flew off its hinges, thrown by a force that sent the masked man sprawling. I hit the ground, gasping for air, as the emergency sirens began to wail. Not a standard alarm, but a high-pitched, piercing sound I'd only heard in drills. The man in the suit stumbled, looking toward the hallway. His composure finally cracked as he pulled a firearm, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the smoke-filled corridor. Someone had breached the facility, and judging by the rapid-fire tactical commands echoing through the vents, it wasn't a rescue team. It was something else entirely, and they were hunting everyone in this room. My cell door was open, but the hallway was a war zone. I had seconds to move, but I had no idea if the people arriving were coming to save me or to silence me forever. The smoke stung my eyes, tasting of scorched wiring and ozone. Through the haze, I saw the man in the charcoal suit scramble for cover behind the heavy steel of the doorframe. He was shouting into a comms unit, his voice frantic, demanding backup from a perimeter that was clearly already compromised. I didn't wait for him to look my way again. Adrenaline, sharp and electric, surged through my veins, masking the terror of the situation. I lunged for the fallen tactical mask on the floor, shoved it onto my face, and scrambled toward the ventilation shaft near the floor. It was a gamble, but staying in that cell meant certain death by a syringe or a bullet. I crawled through the narrow metal tunnel, my heart hammering against my chest like a trapped bird. Below me, I could hear the sounds of a professional tactical operation. These weren't police. They moved with the lethal efficiency of a private military group. They weren't there to arrest anyone. They were there to burn the place down and ensure no records survived. I popped the vent cover in a dark, narrow corridor that I guessed led to the service elevators. As I dropped to the floor, I saw a figure standing near a junction box. A woman in dark tactical gear, her face covered, holding a device that looked like a localized EMP generator. She saw me and raised a weapon, but I held up my hands, my palms open. "I'm the target," I hissed, my voice muffled by the mask. "They're pinning the organized scheme on me. If you're here to clean up, you should know the director is still in the sub-basement with the ledgers." She paused, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. Her eyes flickered with a strange, detached recognition. "You're the officer," she whispered. "We aren't here for you. We're here for the director." He stepped over the line when he started leaking intel to the other side. "My employers want the ledger returned to the original owners." My stomach dropped. I had traded one nightmare for another. I wasn't being rescued. I was being caught in the middle of a war between two factions of the same corrupt entity. I realized then that the director wasn't just a rogue official. He was a gatekeeper who had tried to play both sides, and now the entire hierarchy was collapsing under the weight of its own greed. "Give me the device," I demanded, grabbing a heavy pipe from a maintenance cart nearby. "Don't be a hero," she warned. "You're already a ghost in the system. Your life is over. Walk away, and maybe you survive the night." "My life ended the moment I saw those packages," I said, my resolve hardening into something cold and jagged. "I'm not letting them frame me for this." I didn't wait for her to argue. I sprinted toward the sub-basement stairwell, hearing her shout behind me. I hit the door with my shoulder, bursting into the director's bunker just as he was locking a briefcase. He looked up, his face pale, surrounded by the remnants of the illegal packages that had started this madness. He grabbed a piece of illegal weaponry from the table, but he was clumsy, a bureaucrat playing at being a soldier. "You?" he gasped, his composure finally shattering. "How are you not unconscious?" "I'm the consequence," I said, lunging forward. We collided, the impact sending us both crashing into the server racks that lined the room. The struggle was frantic, a desperate mess of punches and desperate lunges. I wasn't fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting for the memory of the person I used to be. I managed to pin him, slamming his head against the server rack. The connection light on the main terminal blinked. The backup I had sent earlier hadn't been fully deleted. It had been sitting in a hidden partition. With one desperate move, I hit the broadcast command, sending the decrypted evidence of the entire organized scheme to every major news outlet in the capital. The screen flashed. Upload complete. The director stopped fighting. He looked at the monitor, his face turning an ash gray. Sirens finally began to wail. Real, legitimate sirens from the city police, not the tactical cleanup crew. The facility was being stormed. In the ensuing chaos, I didn't stay to be interviewed. I slipped out through the loading bay, vanishing into the cover of the DC night as federal and state units converged on the site. The news hit within the hour. By morning, the director was in custody, facing a massive sentence for his role in the scheme. The evidence I'd broadcast had effectively dismantled the protection layer of his operation. I'm writing this from a terminal in a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty. I'm a ghost, living in the shadows. But for the first time in a long time, the world knows the truth. They tried to frame me, to bury me, and to replace my story with their own. But they forgot one thing. When you pull on a thread hard enough, the entire tapestry comes apart. I lost my career, my home, and my name. But I kept the one thing they couldn't take, my conscience. The system is still broken, but at least now, everyone knows exactly who the monsters are.